Enter chapter 6. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people. Jesus is about to use 3 of the most common religious works in Israel to make a very strong statement. Your righteousness has to exceed the Pharisees and the scribes. They pray, they fast, and they give self-righteously for the attention of people in a self-centered way that is all about people's approval, and it has nothing to do with God. It has everything to do with their own selfish gain. So he's going to say things like, beware of practicing your righteousness. Remember how in chapter 5 he said, let your light shine. Let your light shine. Well, they might be tempted to be like, okay, like the scribes and Pharisees. And Jesus is like, nah, bruh. Your righteousness has to be different. When you practice your righteousness or do good works in front of people, beware that you don't do that to be seen by them. This is the problem. For then you have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So this is not about, I only should do things in private and secrecy. This is when you do it for the attention of people. Public prayer, public giving, public fasting is not the issue. It's the heart of the matter. Why are you doing it? Who are you doing it for? What is it doing for you? These people, they give for an earthly reward. He says, then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, so here we have our first example. Don't sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do. Let's highlight the hypocrites. In the synagogues and in the streets, they like to make a public spectacle of themselves. They just want to be praised by others, right? That's their problem. They make this big old spectacle. Truly I say to you, they've received their what? Their what? Their reward. Yeah, Ramona brings up a good point. If everything's private, how's your light shining? The whole point is that you and I would have our light shine, which assumes public demonstrations of God's goodness. But Jesus is warning how to go about that. Okay? And you can't miss it. Where's my statement? So they've received their reward. You want God's reward, but they have received theirs. When you give to the needy, which assumes you're doing it, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. He's going to say the same thing about prayer, say the same thing about fasting. Okay? Jesus encourages, hey, when you give, do it for your Father who sees in secret. He will reward you. In other words, when you give in such a way where you're going after what your Father can give you. And you're going to see at the end of chapter 6, the main thing God gives seems to be himself. In other words, I don't give for what the world can give me. Approval, status, influence, fame. The worldly rewards that fade, I don't want that. The hypocrites want that. That's why they make a public spectacle of themselves. But if I'm really after my Father's reward, then I can give in secret when he calls me to, and I don't need to text people and put it on Facebook. I don't need to post it on Instagram, but subtle humble boast. You ain't humble bragging or humble boasting, nothing. You're making a public spectacle of yourself. And when you pray, here's the second thing he's going to list out. Remember, he's removing self-righteousness over and over. And saying, you see how they give? And they're like, yeah, they're awesome. And Jesus is like, don't give like them. And they're like, yeah, they're not awesome. My daughter does this all the time. In the middle of saying something so confidently, my son will correct her and she'll change her mind on the fly. Yeah, that's a movie. It's not a movie, Layla. It's not a movie. That's what they should be doing when they're hearing this. Should we give like the hypocrites? Jesus goes, no. We should not give like the hypocrites. Okay. When you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. They love to stand and pray in the synagogues at the street corners that they may be seen. That they may be seen. Do you see the issue? public spectacle. Look at me. I'm awesome. I want you to like me. But you're going to see at the end of the day, this is all for money. The more influence and status and fame and trust these Pharisees and scribes gain from the people, the more money in their pockets. And you're going, that's a little far-fetched. I say to you, they've received their reward. And once again, twice, notice twice, in giving and praying, they've settled for earthly, temporary rewards that man can give. But he goes, when you pray, go into your room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who's in secret. And your Father who's in secret will reward you. Because my Father sees me, I don't need anyone else to. If God is leading me to do this in front of anyone else, I will, but I'm not concerned with their opinion. I'm concerned with His. And the reward He gives is mainly Himself. When you pray, don't heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do. They think they'll be heard for their many words. So now He brings the Gentiles in. Notice all the different references. Jesus will address, don't pray like the Gentiles. Or, if you're loving like this, aren't you just loving like the Gentiles? Or aren't you just loving like the tax collectors? Or aren't you just, don't give like the hypocrites. Don't pray like the hypocrites. Don't pray like the Gentiles. What's wrong with the pagan Gentiles, man? Leave them out of this. Well, if you're a Gentile in the crowd, you're like slouching in your chair going, I'm Jewish, I promise. Nope, we can see you, Gentile. Here's the problem with the way they pray. They think they'll be heard for their many words. Mindless repetition, trusting in my words. Kind of like Jesus is telling the people not to trust in their own self-righteousness and performance and good works and ability to do the law. Don't be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Isn't that good news? Meaning, I don't have to mindlessly repeat myself, thinking I'm informing God. The more I say this, I'll get His attention. No, it's like He heard it. He knows what you need. So pray like it. Pray like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. On earth as it is in heaven. In other words, prioritize God. Prioritize His kingdom. Prioritize His will. Prioritize His domain when you pray. Let those things be the first and primary priorities of your prayer time. I just want you, Father, I want your name to be glorified. I want your kingdom to come. I want your will to be done. The same way it's done perfectly in heaven. Give us this day. Notice how my requests and my petitions for my personal life come after putting God first. Because with the Gentiles and the Pharisees, do you know who they put first in their prayers? They put themselves first. Good to see you, Brad. It says, this is fire. So glad you decided to do a live on this. This is fun. I'm getting tired and I gotta pee, but I'll make it work. Glad you're able to hang out with us for a little bit. Where's my pen? And look at this. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our debts. It's interesting that our physical needs, Jesus connects to our spiritual debt. Isn't that interesting? How fascinating. Why in the same breath? God, give me my physical, meet my physical needs. What I need today, and forgive me of sin. I wonder if this relates to blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the poor in spirit. Those who recognize they have spiritual debt, and they ask God to forgive them. It seems like in prayer, there's a time for self-reflection and being aware of my own, failures and mishaps throughout the day, to bring those honestly before God. As we have also forgiven our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Notice the anticipation for temptation and evil coming your way. And think about how this relates to the hypocrites. They don't pray like this. Their prayers are not at all centered around these things. The Gentiles, not even thinking about these things. These are backwards. The kingdom of God is upside down to this world. It's a complete flip of this world's kingdom and culture. Now look at verse 14. This freaks people out. But when you understand what Jesus is doing, remember, he's raising the standard and saying, if you want to be in the kingdom, guess what? You got to be perfect. And so everyone should go, bummer. Can't be perfect. And Jesus goes, that realization will draw you to me to give you righteousness. You don't come to God asking for righteousness unless you realize you lack that yourself. So, look at verse 14. I've heard people explain this to seem like God won't forgive you unless you forgive people. And it says it almost verbatim like that. But remember what Jesus is doing. He's saying, you got to be perfect like my Father's perfect. We can't. You have to forgive perfectly or you won't be forgiven. We can't. Okay, then I guess God's forgiveness can't hinge upon your performance. I guess it has to hinge upon Jesus. If you forgive others their trespasses, your Heavenly Father will also forgive you. This is similar to the idea we saw of Jesus saying, look, when you bring your gift to the altar, deal with your issues you have between you and others. It's the idea, it might seem like God's forgiveness of me hinges upon my ability to forgive other people. But if you read it in context, this is once again Jesus saying, you got to be perfect, you got to be perfect. And people are going, we can't. He's going, well, the law and the prophets are perfect love. Got to fulfill that perfectly. Follow the law, you live by the law. You can't follow the law, you actually die and it accuses you. Okay, so what do? Well, Jesus is going to say, you come to me for righteousness. If you forgive others their trespasses, your Father will also forgive you. But this is what scares people. If you do not forgive others their trespasses. Cue eerie music. Ooh, what'll happen? Well, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Dun, dun, dun. So if you're thinking, well, there's a lot of ways to look at this. If there are people in the crowd who are going, I don't need forgiveness, I'm good, then you won't ask for forgiveness and you'll remain unforgiven. If you think God forgives because of my ability to do, then you need to do things perfectly and never mess up and forgive people perfectly and love people perfectly, or there's no forgiveness for you. And you're like, that sucks. Exactly. No human can meet the standard of God and enter his kingdom. Jesus is talking to Israelites who assume we descend from Abraham. So therefore we're in God's kingdom, and Jesus is systematically going, nope, 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 and nope. Everything they're standing on, ripping it out from under them, because they stand on the law as their hope. And Jesus in John's gospel goes, you look to Moses in the law, can't save you. They actually testify of me. I save you. That's what Jesus says.